Hello Year 7, welcome to your next lesson of the Bible stories. Let's have a look at the vocabulary we got here. So we got simple sentence. What type of sentence is this, and can you give an example? So what I'd like you to do is stop the video now please and see if you can answer that and give an example. Next one, a compound sentence. So what type of sentence is this, and can you give an example? So again, if you can stop the video now, please, and jot down your response. Your final one is a complex sentence. What type of sentence is this one, and can you give an example? So once again, stop the video, please, and jot down your response. Okay, so your knowledge goal today is to explain the differences between sentence structures, and your steps to success are: what is a simple, compound, and complex sentence are, so you know what they are, and how might these be used for deliberate effect in your parable. So let's have a look at a simple sentence. A simple sentence is a short one with one piece of information or a clause in it. Okay, it's an independent clause. By independent, I mean that if you think about yourself, if you're independent, you can do things for yourself, you can stand alone. The same as this type of sentence, it's independent, it makes sense on its own. So Jane kicked the ball. You've got Jane is the subject, kicked is the verb or the doing word or the action word, and ball is the object. Okay, so quite straightforward. Now these types of sentences actually are very good for creating tension. So without warning he ran. The sight was shocking. He was terrified. Okay, so just some examples of how they can sort of create tension. They can also be used to make important points. So, for example, I love you. Yeah, nice and simple. The next type of sentence that we use are compound sentences. Now, these are types of sentences with two independent pieces of information or two independent clauses joined together with a conjunction. Now, conjunctions are joining words, okay? And the best way to remember these ones to join these sentences is the acronym FANBOYS. You might remember that from primary school. So you've got the F that stands for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S for so. So FANBOYS. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got Jane kicked the ball. There's your independent clause. You've got the subject, verb, and the action, the object rather. And there's your joining word. So they're two independent sentences or simple sentences joined together. Jane kicked the ball and it went over the roof. Okay, so you could actually put a full stop at the end of ball. Jane kicked the ball, it went on the roof. Okay, but instead, to make a compound sentence, you could remove the full stop and join them together with a conjunction. A complex sentence. This is a sentence with at least one main piece of information, or the independent clause, and at least one secondary piece of information, which is referred to as a subordinate or dependent clause. So if you think about dependent and independent, so independent is when it can stand alone, it can do things for itself. Dependent means you're reliant upon something else to make sense. So we've got the beginning part, which is your independent clause. Jane kicked the ball and it went on the roof. So all this makes sense on its own. But the second part, you see you've got a comma there which separates it off. The second part, which meant she had to find a teacher, is adding additional information, okay? The complex sentence actually makes it easier to add layers of information to give detail to your writing. So the bit in blue, the subordinate or the dependent clause, which meant she had to find a teacher, is relying on the first part of the sentence to make sense, because this subordinate clause doesn't make sense on its own, which meant she had to find a teacher. So Jane kicked the ball and it went on the roof, which meant she had to find a teacher. So it's giving you that additional information to help it make sense. Now, this part here, the complex sentence, the secondary piece of information or the subordinate clause can come at different points in the sentence. Have a look at these two sentences below and see if you can label the clauses. So, tired and confused, I walked into the lesson. So have a look at the sentence and I want you to decide which part is the subordinate or the dependent clause. So stop the video now and make yourself some notes, please. So let's have a look, see if you're right. So tired and confused is the subordinate or the dependent clause because it doesn't make sense on its own and it's reliant upon the next part of the sentence to help it make sense. So I walked into the lesson would be your independent clause. It makes sense on its own. So the first part of the sentence is your subordinate or your dependent clause. Now the second one is a little bit more tricky. John, who leaned heavily on his walking stick, sat down on the chair. So I'd like you to stop the video and see if you can identify which part is the subordinate or the dependent clause and the other one which is the independent clause, which makes sense on its own. So stop the video now, please. So let's see if you're right. So if we take the middle part that's sectioned off by the commas, who leaned heavily on his walking stick, that is your subordinate or dependent clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. Who leaned heavily on his walking stick. That's additional information that's being included for the reader. So if we was to take that out and just use the sentence, John sat down on the chair, that's your independent clause. Okay, it makes sense on its own, but the middle part, who leaned heavily on his walking stick, is your subordinate clause. It's adding the additional information, but doesn't make sense on its own. So hopefully you got that one right. Now the next part you're going to do is to reread the parables and try to see if you can identify any of these different sentence types. So have a look through the Good Samaritan and the Prodigal Son and see what you can identify. Is there a particular type of sentence that might be used more frequently? So I'd like you to stop the video now, please, and see if you can find examples of these sentences. Okay, what you're going to be doing over the course of a few lessons is writing your own parable, and this is going to be aimed at students your age. So you need to think about who you're writing for, so think about the things that relate to you and things that you might enjoy. Okay, so you're going to be given the rest of this lesson to start planning your parable. Now, the first thing that you need for this is your own moral message that you're going to be giving. Now, this could be, for example, to always tell the truth, or have the importance of keeping your promises, or perhaps not judging others, or even treating people how you want to be treated. So you could use one of those that I've suggested, or any other moral that you can think of that you would like to write about. Next thing we'd like you to do is to think about a main character and any supporting characters that will be in your parable. So are these going to be young people? Are they going to be elderly people, for example? Are they going to be a group of friends? So it's your decision which characters you are going to be putting in your story. You could perhaps do a little drawing and, you know, try to conjure up your character for your reader, decide what they're really going to be like to convey to others. And then finally, you need to think about what is going to happen to them or what they're going to do to tell the moral of your parable. So give this some thought, jot yourself down some ideas. You might even want to do a storyboard to help your ideas come to life. That would be absolutely fine. You plan in whatever way you feel happy with. So I'd like you to stop the video now, please, and make yourself some notes. Now, your final feedback is thinking about how you might be able to use simple sentences for deliberate effect in your parable. Could you use them to create tension, as I said to you before, or could you use them to make a statement?